Hello, welcome to today's cast iron cooking with the Iron Maiden. I'm going to show you how easy it is to make homemade bagels. I promise once you try these, you're never going to want to buy them from the store again. So I'm going to start by taking a package of yeast and putting it in my bowl. This is rapid rise yeast, but you can use any yeast, regular yeast, rapid rise, because we're going to go ahead and proof this. So I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of sugar and put that in the bowl, along with a 1/4 cup of tepid or warm water. And that's going to allow the yeast to start to rise and bubble and get soft, and that's what's also called proving. So I'm going to proof the yeast. And I am just going to give that just a little stir to get it all mixed there. So let's go over the rest. That should set for at least maybe 5 minutes. Let's go ahead and go over the rest of our ingredients while that starts to prove. I'll also use a tablespoon of salt. Since I'm making bagels, I'm using kosher salt, but you could really use any salt. I've got 3 tablespoons of solid shortening. Another 2 cups of water. That gives me a total of 2 1/4 cups of water. I put the 1/4 cup in there just a moment ago, and there's another 2 cups here that we'll add. I'll also use 6 cups of bread flour. It is best to buy bread flour if you can. The bread flour has a higher gluten content. That's going to help build the structure in the bagels. Bagels are really are different than just rolls with holes in them. They have a different structure and taste and consistency. They're a little chewier, and that's a result of the gluten in the flour. So go buy yourself some bread flour if you want to try bagels. So those are the ingredients for my bagels, and the 2 tablespoons of sugar, of course, I just put in the bowl. And when you make your bagels, you're going to need a couple of more things though. You're going to boil the bagels in a water bath, and in the water bath we're going to add another 1/4 cup of sugar mixed with a teaspoon of baking soda. I'm also going to use a little olive oil to coat my bowl with, that I put the bread into rise, and I'll have a piece of cling wrap and a towel for that. And I've got a little cornmeal for coating the griddles or the baking pans that I'm going to bake the bagels on. You'll also need your topping ingredients. You're going to need 1 to 2 egg whites that you'll mix with a teaspoon of water that you'll coat the eggs with, make a little glaze on the eggs, and then whatever toppings or flavors you happen to like. These are just some of the more common ones. Caraway, fennel, sesame seed, poppy. We like poppy, and this I found this garlic mix, which is really nice. And for the chopped onions, what we'll actually do with those is put them in a little bowl and add some water to them so that they can soften before we put them on the bagels. So you'll just take these and go ahead and pour some in a bowl and add a little bit of water to soak into them, and that will soften those up so that you can use them as toppings for the bagels. They also sell, I know places, everything bagel mix, and if you've got a certain flavor you like, you could also just use a little bit of kosher salt on them, whatever flavors you want. So let's come back and see if our yeast is starting to bubble here. And you can see the yeast is starting to get a little bubbly in there. I think I'm going to give it 1 more minute, and then we'll go ahead and add the rest of our ingredients. You can see the yeast is nice and bubbly now. It's working, it's proved itself. So we're going to go ahead and add the rest of our ingredients. Another 2 cups of warm water, or tepid water, our tablespoon of salt, our 3 tablespoons of solid shortening, and we're just going to turn that on for a moment and let that mix. And then we will start to add our 6 cups of bread flour, and I'm just going to leave that on a low speed, and I'm stirring up my flour as always because it packs down and you'll get too much flour if you just scoop it straight out. This is a 1/2 cup measure, so we're going to add 12 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm just slowly dumping them in, letting it mix a little bit. 5. 10. 11. And I'll let it mix a minute before I add my last scoop. Turn it up a hair, make sure. If the dough is too stiff, then we won't add it. If it looks like it's still a little soft, we'll go ahead and work in that last half cup. And I think this will definitely take it. It's still a little soft in there. So we'll go ahead and put that in. We're going to let that mix in. And then once this is mixed in and it's all together, we're going to turn the mixer up a couple of notches and we're going to let it work good. And we're going to let it work for a good 5 or 6 minutes. And it's important to do this. It's really important to let your mixture work here for about 6 minutes. That allows the gluten to develop and work, and that will give you a lot of your texture and structure in the bagels. We were talking earlier about using the bread flour. It's got the higher gluten. We need to knead the gluten for about 6 minutes here so that you develop those strands of gluten and give it its structure, and they'll help give the texture and flavor. It's also real important not to let your mixture alone. If you notice the mixture is starting to walk around here on the counter, it can indeed walk off the counter if left unintended. So sit back, make sure you've got yourself your coffee or something handy, and let the mixture run for a few minutes here, and then we'll be ready to put the mixture in a bowl and let it rise. It's been a good 6 minutes. Our dough should be nicely worked now. We're going to go ahead and take it out of the bowl. Nice, got a nice stretch to it. The dough might be a little bit soft or seem a little bit sticky. That's okay. Good to the last drop. And we're just going to dump that on the counter or on my work surface here. I put a little bit of flour on the countertop already. Okay, I've gotten all the dough out of the pan, so I'm just going to give this a quick knead by hand. Get a little flour on my hands. Use this to make sure I get it off the work surface. And we're just going to give it a quick knead by hand. It's a very soft dough. Use a little flour on our hands. And just work it a moment. And it is, like so you can see, pretty soft. And we're going to, I'm going to take a little bit of olive oil and pour that in my bowl. So just a little bit, enough to coat the bottom of the bowl good. And I'll take my dough and I'm going to drop it in the olive oil, and I'm going to turn the dough so that all of the dough is now coated with olive oil. And I'm going to take a piece of saran wrap and place that over that. And then I'm going to cover it with a towel. And that's going to keep the top of the dough surface from drying out, putting that saran wrap down there like that over it along with the oil. I'm going to put a towel over it, and we'll let this set 1 hour on the countertop to rise, and then we're going to punch it down, and then we're going to actually put it in the refrigerator for 4 hours. So you do want to start your bagels earlier in the day, but you can put them actually in the refrigerator for up to 2 days, so you can do them in the evening and then roll them out and bake them the next morning, however you want to do it. But allow at least 4 hours in the refrigerator after 1 hour on the countertop. So 1 hour on the countertop, and I'll see you back in an hour. Okay, our dough has been resting for an hour. You can see it's risen quite a lot in the bowl. We're just going to peel that back, punch the dough down, just give it a couple of turns to get the air out of it. And we're going to put it back in, leave it in the bowl rather, put our plastic wrap back over it, and I'm going to put it in the refrigerator for at least 4 hours, but up to 2 days. So again, you can leave it in overnight, do these in the morning, however works best for you. One more comment on the dough. I mixed it using my dough hook on the mixer. You could, of course, mix this by hand. You, again, need to make sure that you knead it for a good 6 to 8 minutes by hand, which is why I prefer to use the dough hook. So we're going to go in the ice box here. It's almost noon, so I can roll these out around 4 o'clock. A good 4 hours in the refrigerator. See you back then. It's been 4 hours that our dough's been in the refrigerator. I just took it out. Might need to scrape it back in. It might be going over the sides a little bit. That's okay. Before we start on our dough, we're going to turn our oven on. And before we do that, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to make sure our shelves are where we want them to be. And I'm going to take an old pan and put this down in the bottom of the oven. One of the things you want to do when you're baking bagels is to add a little bit of steam to the oven, and you don't necessarily want to pour water right on the floor of your oven. So if you put an old pan down there, we can pour the water for the steam into that. And I'm going to turn my oven on to 475. Now, I'm actually going to turn it back to 450 when we start baking, but when you open the oven door, you're going to lose a few degrees of heat there from it being open, and you want it to be nice and hot and at the right temperature when you're baking. So we'll start at 475. I've turned my water on for boiling the bagels in. I've got a scooper here to take them out of the water. I've got my 1/4 cup of sugar and a teaspoon of baking soda that I'll add to the water once it starts boiling before I put the bagels in. I've got a cookie tray. I'm just going to be putting the bagels on this after I roll them out before I boil them. I've got all of my toppings ready. I've got an egg white that I've already beaten with a teaspoon of water. And I'm going to be using today poppy seed, garlic, and my onions, dehydrated onions, which I've already soaked in a couple teaspoons of water. And I might do a couple of salt bagels today. Last thing I would need to do to get set up is to sprinkle a little cornmeal on my skillets. I'm going to be using these griddles to bake on today. This recipe will make 10 bagels, and really you just put a little bit in your hand and just sprinkle it around the skillet is good. I'm going to be baking, this recipe makes 10 bagels, so I've got enough room. I'll do 3 on each of the round ones and 4 on the square ones. You could, of course, use a larger griddle to put them all on, or do 6 on that and 4 on this, whatever you want. You can put them on a baking sheet, you can put them on a pizza stone, whatever you need to for baking them up, but just leave enough room for your 10 bagels. Now, so since I'm making 10 bagels, I want to divide this dough into 10 equal pieces. The best way I found to do that is to actually use a scale. I've got a digital scale over here. I've got my scale here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another bowl, and I'm going to set that bowl on there. And most of your scales have an option to zero them. And you might want to put a dab of oil in the bowl. And I'll just put my bread dough in there. We can slide this out so it's a little easier to see. So this is 1,300 kilos, and that's real easy to divide by 10 and give you 130 grams per roll. Versus 2 pounds, 14 ounces. Dividing that by 10 is difficult. So I'll stick with the kilos for this because it makes the math a little easier. So I have, as I said, 1,300 grams, so it'll be 130 grams per bagel. So I'm going to start by just dividing my dough into equal portions, and each weigh 130 grams, and then we can roll those each out into a bagel. So it's probably going to be a ball about that size. That's, let's see, oh, just a hair off. I'll add a little more. Just another pinch. And 134, we'll take a couple off. So 129 is close to 130, that's about right. So I'm just going to make balls, and so that's what, I don't know, maybe a little smaller than a hard ball, about a lemon size of a lemon maybe. So we'll just keep dividing our dough off into portions. And like I said, you could just eyeball this, just divide it, but you're going to want about 10 equal portions. Oops, that one's a little big. Take a little out there, a little more. So like I said, I'll just keep dividing my dough into 10 equal portions. Okay, I've got my dough divided into 10 equal portions. So I'm going to take each of these and I'm going to work them into a ball. And to do that, I'm kind of just grabbing the outer edges and pulling them up and kind of tucking them in. So it's kind of a motion like that. So we grab there and rolling it into itself. And I'm going to work it for just a minute, get the air bubbles out, and also to help build up some of that gluten we were talking about before, so our bagel will have some nice structure and shape, good texture. So we'll just work this into a ball for a minute. And after we've worked it into a ball for a moment here, now if you find the dough is sticking to your hands, you can add a little olive oil to them. Some folks will actually wear gloves. It does help if your hands are cooler. So once you've got the dough worked for a minute, you're going to take your finger and you're simply going to poke it in the center, and you're going to stretch the bagel out so it looks about like a ring toss. About 2.5 inches, 2 inches diameter in the center. It is going to shrink back together a little bit, but when you start it should be about that big. Now my fingers, 4 fingers, measure actually 2.5 inches across. So I can use that. A lot of folks, if your hand's a little larger or whatever, you might only need 3 fingers. Just measure it on against a ruler and see what it takes. These are real handy for helping to pick up the dough, and it finds it's sticking a little bit, so I'm just going to put a little olive oil on my hands there, and that'll help keep it from sticking. And then I'm just going to work this next one. Now usually what I do while I'm working these, once I get a couple of them done, I'll start them boiling and I'll get someone else to work on the glazing of them for me, and we can make a little bit of an assembly line. But if it's just you, or you don't have anyone who can assist you, then just do this. You'll make them all up and then we'll boil them and we'll glaze them. So work the dough for a minute, get that ball shape going, and then poke your finger through the center, stretch it a little, make it look like, remember that old game ring toss? Looks kind of like a ring toss. And we'll set it down, and now it is going to contract up a little as it sets. That's okay. And we'll just grab our next piece of dough and get going. Now usually I only put about 3 or 4 of these in the pan at once to boil. You need room between them as they're boiling. So like I said, usually I get about 3 of them rolled out, and then I'll get someone else to start doing the glazing, make an assembly line. I found with these bagels it's not hard to get volunteers because they're so tasty. So we'll just keep working that. We got a nice circle going. Again, poke your finger through the center, stretch it a little bit, get it nice and even, ring toss size. I can put my fingers, all 4 fingers through the center there, set it down, and keep going. All right, I've got my 10 bagels rolled out. I'm going to take my baking soda and sugar and dump that in the boiling water. And we can drop in our first 3 bagels. We can give them another little stretch here as we drop them in. And we're going ahead and drop in 3 bagels. Because like I said, you want enough room for them to float around in between them. And I'm going to set the timer for 2 minutes. You want to boil them for 1.5 to 2 minutes. So I'll go ahead and set that for 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, I'm going to flip them, and then I'm going to cook them for another 1.5 to 2 minutes. And then we will put them on our towel here. We'll turn them over once to dry them a little bit. From there, they'll go to our skillets that we already put the cornmeal on. Then I've got an egg white that I've beaten with some water, as I said, and just gotten all the big lumps out of that. We'll go ahead and glaze them with a little bit of that, and then we can add the toppings of our choice. We're down to almost 2 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and start flipping my bagels here in the water. Just turn them over once. And I'll reset the timer for another 2 minutes, and then we can take them out of the water. So as I said, cook them for 1.5 to 2 minutes per side, so there's 20 seconds left. I can go ahead and start taking these out. I'm just going to put them on the end of my towel. And I put them on the end so that I can go ahead and just do this and give them a quick turn to help dry them off a little bit, get rid of the excess water. And I'm going to go ahead and put in my next batch and start those cooking while I glaze those. So we can drop the next three. A little stretch before we drop them in. These guys we'll put on our pan here. I'm just going to put them back on my scoop, and that makes it easier to transfer. Now you can try glazing and dipping them, but I found that that makes them, they're hard and hot to pick up. I prefer just to glaze them on the pan and then sprinkle the toppings on the top. So we'll just put some egg glaze on them, and you're going to wash them actually twice. So we'll do each once, and then we'll come back and we'll put a second coating on each one. So we just get that egg glaze all the way around the edges there. And as I said, we'll glaze each one twice. So I do each one once, and then we go back and we do a second round. And just keep working through these. And then we'll put the toppings of our choice on them. And then we'll start with our onion here. And just spread that out on them. And so I'm going to do 2 onions, 2 poppy, 2 garlic. Maybe 2, we'll see what else. And let's see, I think over here we're almost up to our 2 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and flip these. And we'll put our timer back for another 2 minutes. And we'll let those finish boiling on their second side while we finish off our first of these 3 bagels. And I'm going to put some of this mixed up garlic stuff on this one. Try not to sprinkle too much of it on your pan, it'll just burn, but and the garlic can be a little potent, you might not want to go too crazy with it. So we've got 2 onion and a garlic on here. I'll move this pan back. We'll put all the pans in the oven at once. I've got this pan ready to go. These have another minute and a half or so, and then we'll start glazing those. So we'll glaze those, top them, drop those, boil, turn, glaze, and then we'll be ready to put them all in the oven. Our bagels are all glazed and topped. We've got poppy seed, we've got garlic, we've got onion, we've got an everything, we've got some salts, we've got a plain. They're ready to go in the oven. I'm going to first, as I said, take and pour some water into that roasting pan. That's going to give me steam in the oven while it's cooking. I'm now going to add my bagels here with the bagels on them. And I'm going to turn the oven down to 450 degrees. Oops. As you can see, it's actually dropped a little bit. It's actually down to 430. So that's one of the reasons, like I said, why we started it at 475 to help keep that temperature up there while we have the door open. So let me set my timer for 25 minutes. And we'll let these bake for 25 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll check on them. Okay, our 25 minutes are up. I'm going to turn the oven off, and I'm going to leave the bagels in the oven with the door closed, and I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. So we're going to leave them in there for 5 minutes, oven off, door closed, and then we're going to come back and we're going to open the door, leave them in there for another 5 minutes, and then we'll take them out and let them cool on the baking rack. So 5 more minutes in the oven, oven off, door closed. Okay, the bagels have had 5 minutes in the oven with the oven off but the door closed. We're going to set the timer for another 5 minutes. I'm going to crack the door like that. And then after this 5 minutes, we're going to go ahead and take the bagels out and let them cool down, and they'll be ready for toasting and cream cheese. Alright, our timer has gone off. Our bagels have had the 5 minutes with the door open. We're going to go ahead and take these out of the oven. And then we're just going to put them over on the cooling rack so they can cool off a little bit. And you really do need to let them cool a little bit before you try and cut them and toast them. But once they've cooled, you can go ahead and slice them up and toast them, and then spread them with cream cheese or butter or add lox, whatever it is you like on your bagels.
And you can freeze them.
If you're not going to eat them all within the first couple of days, you can freeze them. If the bagels go stale on you, you can actually cut them into about 1/4 inch thick slices, put a little butter or olive oil, some herbs or salt on them, and toast them, put them on your bread rack with a baking tray under them in the oven at 375 for 15 to 20 minutes and make bagel chips. So here we go, one nice batch of bagels, fresh from the oven, ready for toasting. Well, maybe they need to cool and then they'll be ready for toasting. Alright, the bagels have cooled off. They're ready to be put in a bag and stored. If you're not going to eat them all now, you can freeze them. Or, like I said, if there's leftovers, you can also make bagel chips. So I'm just going to slice this bagel here, and it will be ready for toasting and a little bit of cream cheese. But we've got a nice bagel here, ready for toasting and cream cheese. We hope you've enjoyed today's baking with the Iron Maiden. If so, please like and subscribe to this channel for more